Trading Time with your host, John Rousseau.
Dr. Roger Harrington. What an amazing human being. Him and I have worked together for a very long time, since 2007. He's commissioned me to build some of my best work. We've had a really nice relationship over the years, business, personal, and he's got a lot of really great insights. He is a huge mentor of mine, a really hardworking guy in our community, and is a good example of a good example. Please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Roger Harrington. Roger, where do we start? Thank you for joining today. Where do we start? I first met you in 2007. I saw tarps blowing in the wind on top of Giant's Head Mountain. There were cantilevered roof lines and glue lambs with roof assemblies hanging off of them, giant columns, tarps flapping, and I was just getting into tile setting. And I went up and knocked on your door and said, "Hi, I'm John Rousseau, and I'm going to set all the tile in your house." Something to that effect, like just a complete cold call. You were in a Patagonia down jacket, I think.
Oh, wow.
And you kind of looked at me and said, "Okay, yeah, all right. Well, there was somebody else who was supposed to do that, but maybe we can talk some more." And, well, how many years ago was that? Was that 16, 17 years ago?
All of that.
And we've been kind of having conversations ever since. We've done quite a few projects together, from your beautiful primary residence, the top of Summerland. We did your dental clinic. We did various furniture packages in both of those buildings.
Yep.
We've done
Gorgeous.
overnight fly fishing trips into the mountains, hunting trips. We've got lots of blood on our hands together. Just been an adventure from the very beginning, from the very inception. And the thing that I love about you is your sense of adventure. You always have somewhere that you want to go, something that you want to kill, something that you want to get out in front of. And that's something that I obviously see in myself as well. I always want to go out and run and get hit in the face with a tree branch. So you are, I think one of the things that I noticed early on was our ability to have conversations about different subjects with similar language that just spanned across my trade, your trade, government, money, family, spirituality. It just seemed as though that whatever topic or rant we got off on, there was very little division between us, which is rare. Like, typically you'll agree with 40% of what somebody has to think, and then they start talking and you're like, "Oh shit, you lost me." But yeah. It seems as though that we've always, if there was ever a misunderstanding, it wasn't for long and very easily explainable between us, which I think is rare, especially given our generational detail. So
that's 30 years?
Yeah.
You'll be 40?
I'll be 40 in a couple of days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just turned 72.
Yeah.
Pretty wild, eh?
It is. So I guess all of that to say, I wanted to take a bit of a snapshot of my life at this kind of socially pivotal point, as they say. "Oh, you're midlife now. Well, it's all downhill from here," or whatever, and then I take a look at examples like you, and I go, all downhill. I mean, well, speaking of downhill, I know a guy in his 70s that's pointing his snowboard downhill however many days a season and riding his bike up the mountain and hiking and killing deer by himself. And doesn't sound like you go downhill until you're 85 or 90 years old, when we have examples of somebody who takes care of his body like you, is focused on fitness and health and staying properly upright. You've really set a good example for that.
Thank you.
And you take that very seriously, you and your wife. I guess I want to bring to light for people watching and listening to this the importance of working with one's hands. I think some of the things that we've discovered in the last couple of interviews that we've done is that there's a pandemic of malaise, I guess we'd call it.
Yeah.
And there is a disconnection between the hands and the minds of people. And when we're talking about a bait and switch, when we start taking a look at, we were discussing the gratification of doing something with your hands, like tying one of these small flies that you brought in, these very delicate little flies, and the gratification that you get when you do something that's so intricate like that. Like what is it about that transaction with those materials, and you're making this thing look like something in nature. This is a piece of art.
It is, but it's also a deception.
Exactly, which is right, which plays to a part in your brain where, very much like setting a mousetrap. I'm gonna get that bastard. I'm gonna get him tonight. I'm gonna get him with this fly, right?
Yep.
So when we see our hands doing something so intricate and beautiful, it triggers that. We get a dopamine hit from it. It gets us excited.
It does.
About the possibilities.
Yeah.
Right? When we do something with our hands, like build a cabinet or a piece of furniture, we get excited because we go, oh my God, I get to go put this in the space. I get to enjoy this. I get to take a photo of it. I get to see the client's reaction when they sit in it, all of that. And the bait and switch that I'm referring to is what we've done is we've put a video game controllers in the hands of our children, right? And they see this sense of accomplishment on the screen, and that's the bait and switch, right? And it is addictive.
It's the dopamine.
Very similarly to the way doing that is addictive, very similarly to the way crafting fine furniture is addictive.
Yeah.
Except there is no tangible value add on the back end of that transaction, of the video game transaction. There's no value add. Even if you're getting paid, you're getting paid through fiat, it feels like to me. And so I really see that as a major problem, more so than I did when I was a kid playing video games. It's gone to the next level. I'm concerned that for too many years we have promoted people move away from the trades and working with their hands the way you and I do.
Yep.
And I just want to explore the potential consequences of that with you and get your thoughts on it.
Okay. I think when you and I had the initial discussion and you passed me some of the notes, you were mentioning that it's 30 years that these things have been unwinding in our schools. I'm going to tell you it's 60.
Really?
Okay, so when I was in high school, okay, already they were starting to destroy our learning system, and they were starting to bend this liberalism at the time. And they were pointing people into university. And the parable at the time was go to school, get a good education, get a good job. And so the mentality at the time was you were going to go get a job. Well, a job is kind of a cookie cutter system where you can go and you trade time for money. And one of the things that that you and I both have done is we've owned our own business. And so that's one of the things that even back in the 60s, back when dirt was new, we were taught to go into this system, and no one ever talked about owning your own business. And then the other thing I'm going to touch on briefly is no one taught us about money. And so, and that may come up further in this discussion. You and I have kicked it around a few times.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I got an allowance, and my father and I exchanged silver. That's how we settled our accounts between the two of us. I was paid in silver dollars. I still have those silver dollars.
You weren't paid in fiat currency?
No. Well, and at the time, the currency wasn't fiat.
No, at the time it still
Okay.
had some...
In 1974, Richard Nixon divorced paper money from the gold standard. That's when it uncoupled. Okay, and about 100 years ago, a $20 gold piece, key word there, $20, okay, that would buy a finely tailored suit, okay, and you would, if you showed up with 20 paper dollars, you would get an ounce of gold. So today, if you try and do that stunt, you're going to need at least $2,000 US to make it happen. In fact, I have one of those ounces in my pocket. So if you have to see it, then I can show you.
I'm going to have to see it.
No. But it
Yes.
says, the cool thing is, it says $20 on it.
Yeah.
And when I brought some of that through customs, because it was currency, I didn't get charged because they went, oh, that's currency. We have no business taxing you on that. And I brought that piece of gold through the border, which will take us to another point. But yeah, so those are a couple of things that, you know, turned up back in the 60s. And to this day, our public school systems teach nothing about money.
Teaching nothing about money, and I can definitely support that claim. Nothing about money. And, you know, I hate to say this and make a generalization, but all of the experience that I've ever had in and around friends, parents who were teachers, family members who were teachers, clients when I worked in the restaurant who were teachers, those are not the people that you want teaching you about money.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about, you know, I mean, these are the people that you see on the news all the time complaining about how little money they make. And I have sympathy for teachers. I could not imagine having to do their job and manage all of those children and those expectations from the parents and all of that. But when you also take a look at the calendar and how much teachers work, they work 167 days out of 365 days of the year, and they're complaining about money. So those are not the people that you want teaching your children about money. They're not qualified to do that. I'm not surprised they don't teach that in school. The people you want teaching your kids about money are too busy making it to instruct on it.
Certainly not at a full-time level, but perhaps on a casual mentorship basis, which is
Yes.
kind of the thing that you and I have, again, kicked around, the mentorship thing.
Yeah.
And there's too little of that, and there's a huge difference between going to a formal or an informal daycare, which is what school really is.
Yes.
Okay, and it's gotten more and more to that point where it's a daycare, as opposed to, at least in the 60s, we got some pretty sound academic material, and we were still dealing with what I consider the basics, and that's reading, writing, and people say arithmetic, but really it's calculation. And without those three things, you have an illiterate population. And if you have an illiterate population, then of course the government can do with us as they see fit.
Was that a dare, that last statement to me?
No. Could be.
Was that?
I hadn't thought
Was
of
that
it.
an encouragement, Roger?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just. So you're saying that my presupposition of 30 years was out by 30 years, and that 60 years ago. Because I really think that it's a sales pitch. Because one thing that you left out on your list of goals was the pension. Go to school.
Oh, yeah.
Get an education. Find a job. Get paid. Get a pension. That was something that, to your demographic, was sold very hard by fund managers.
Well, that and Social Security,
Social Security.
which down in the States and here is still one of the biggest Ponzi schemes going. In fact, I wrote a term paper on the end of Social Security, and quite frankly, I don't understand how they've been able to continue doing it, other than the fact that they're doing it with inflated fiat currency. Takes us back.
Yeah, right. Well, that's all connected. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and so we're wondering why the United States debt ceiling moves every single year. What is it now? $31 trillion, which is
All of that.
it's $31 trillion, and isn't their annual GDP somewhere in and around $30 trillion, 29?
So my understanding is the 30 trillion is what they're broadcasting, but it's in excess of 100. So that debt will never, ever be repaid.
That's not the point of that number. It's not, the point of that number is not to ever be repaid.
Yeah.
That number signifies the fact that it'll never stop growing at this rate.
Oh, yeah. It's out of control, literally. But yeah.
So when we're taking a look at unfunded liabilities like social services or social security, pardon me, and the myth of a pension at the end of this whole get educated, get a job, get paid, get a pension so that you can retire. Mm-hmm. This was something that was the mantra of your generation.
It sure was. It sure was. And a good friend of mine said, scripturally, you don't retire. There's nothing in scripture about retiring. So maybe financially we retire, but I mean, I've finished up my career as a dentist a year and a half ago, and I'm busier than a one-eyed cat in a fish store. And now what's happening is I'm dealing with younger people. I'm dealing with very young kids, teaching hands-on skills. I teach archery to a group of, ready for this, unschoolers.
Yeah.
And part of my objective is to help kids get out of this horrible school system, because it's an indoctrination system. They're not getting anything of any value other than the government line. And so that's going to be something you and I are going to be digging in and fighting. I mean, your kids aren't in school, and I got a feeling they're not going to be in the formal school system.
Ever.
There you go.
Ever.
Yeah.
Well, I just look at it and I, again, I don't mean to harp. There are a lot of good people in places, no matter what the organization's result ends up being. I know that there are a lot of good teachers in schools, no matter what the result is, right? Mm-hmm. We had good teachers. I play tennis with some of our old teachers still, right? Yeah. And they're good people. They are. They have good families. But it seems to me like it's become babysitting for poor people's kids. Yeah. That's what it feels like when I was dropping my daughter off at Giants Head School in Summerland. It just felt like I was dropping her off at this daycare facility where her education was being dictated by the slowest person in the class. Yeah. Her health was being dictated by the sickest person in the class always. We were sick. We were sick. Every 10 days we had something else coming home, biting our family from virology perspective.
Well, yeah.
And
I don't know if that's changed, although I don't remember being that sick when I was in school.
I don't remember being, Roger, I don't remember being sick like this ever. Whether it was when I was in school, when I was in high school, when I was in the workplace, like for the 35 years of my life prior to having kids, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Why are they so sick all of a sudden in these schools? And I don't know the answer to that. It's just speculating. Just what's.
I can't answer that
I don't
question.
know either. Yeah.
But as we both just observed, the kids are. We didn't get as sick then, and like you, I saw an accelerated trend where my kids were bringing stuff home and we were getting hit, and we went through a phase just before they were teens, and then it dropped off, and then I stopped getting sick, and I was in a clinic. And
in people's mouths all day.
We were in a biologic swamp,
Yeah.
and
no matter how clean you kept it.
and I didn't get sick.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and for a while, we were under a lot of stress as we built the business, and we may touch on that in this conversation.
Of course.
I got cancer in that adventure, and that also caused me to make changes in my lifestyle, because I appreciated that cancer is driven by lifestyle. Certain part of it is driven by your genome. And so, but we did make changes because despite the fact that the genetics dictate that you're susceptible to it, you have the power to turn those genes on and off. And I've learned over the years that the epigenetics, the ability to turn them on and off, is critical. And by having poor nutrition, you can turn those switches on and then go on to have chronic disease, including cancer.
Mm-hmm. You had testicular cancer?
I did.
You beat it?
I did it.
It's been in remission for 20 years now?
Yeah, we're 27 as of
27
May.
years?
Yeah. Yeah. And I can tell you the day of diagnosis was incredibly scary. And what I find is that great things happen in a place called the fringe of fear. This was not the fringe of fear. This was abject terror.
Well, of course, you had a 13-year-old daughter and you had a 11-year-old son.
12 and 9.
12 and 9.
Okay. And I'm thinking, this could be it. I was 45, and testicular cancer, if it gets away, you're done in a year. And so at that point, I did resolve that if I was going to get taken out, it was going to be a great year. And so I would routinely take the kids out of school and we'd go snowboarding. If we got a 20-centimeter down, I canceled the clinic. And I'd walk in sometimes just for fun. I'd walk into the classroom with my board under my arm. And I'd go, "Who wants to go riding?"
Me, Mr. Harrington.
And I'd take a couple of kids and we'd go sliding for the day, because when the smoke cleared, if I wasn't around, at least they would have some good memories. And I got a minor objection from a few of the teachers. The principal had just lost a child to leukemia the previous year, and he goes, "You're dead right." Because the time spent with Dad is far more valuable than what it is in this government institution.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my kids will tell you about that. We still giggle about the times riding.
You, on that, Roger, you run a ministry out of the wilderness. I do as well, right? We've brought up a lot of friends in the woods, trained a lot of people in the woods to look for things, to enjoy powder, enjoy the trees, enjoy the steep.
Yeah.
You're telling me stories about, spending the day on the mountainside with your grandson now, cutting lines through fresh powder. You survived cancer. You have a beautiful family that are close by that you get to enjoy.
Yep. Yeah. So And we're doing this sort of mentorship, and I owe it to the mentorship that I had growing up.
Oh, interesting.
And there were three people in my life who were key. Of course, my dad, and he had just the wackiest thinking, and he taught me some very valuable skills. He did teach me about money, as we already discussed. He taught me about establishing an angle, he called it, and he said that you can find an angle or an edge in life, and then you work it. And what that does is it pulls you out ahead of the rest of the gang, the group. And one of the things he taught was all you have to do is be in the top 49%. And if you're in the top 49%, then you're a winner. And so then what happens is, as you keep pushing that edge, basis the concepts of compound interest,
Yes.
your edge just keeps
Increasing.
getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's how you pull away from the fleet.
That's right.
And so that was instrumental. And the other two people who were key in my life were my scoutmaster, and I'll come back to him in one sec, and then a guy named Ed Marceau, who was probably the biggest influence in me becoming a dentist. Now, I had decided before I had met him that I was going to be a dentist, and that's a conversation dealing with, again, money and future and time management. And then my scoutmaster introduced me to outdoor skills, and he was the least likely person you could imagine who would be able to do that. Now you're going, yeah, scouting outdoors, but when you looked at Larry O'Keefe, he was Yoda. He was this little fat dumpling. And he was a teacher by profession.
Yeah.
He did a pilot program called the Paradise Project down in California. So he and a close friend of his moved to California for 2 years and ran the Paradise Project, which was based on the program in our scout troop. And basically the kids ran the scout troop, not the adults.
That's something that we hear coming up more and more in advanced education scenarios.
Okay, and they did the Paradise Project, and the kids
Interesting.
ran the curriculum. And the biggest thing that Yoda had for me was he taught me about integrity. And he came under so much pressure while he was teaching from the school board because of his outrageous ways of approaching problems. In the scout troop, his specialty was tripping us up. He deliberately would trip us up and make us fail. He wasn't interested in the failure per se. What he was trying to teach us was how to recover. Mm-hmm. Because one of the biggest lessons in life, and not in schools, is you have to learn how to fail and then get up. You have to learn how to fail forward. And I taught my own kids, I said, the biggest thing that will make you successful is make lots of mistakes. And there are just some very basic rules to making mistakes. And those rules are: don't get killed, don't get maimed, try and avoid repeating the same error more than 2 times. And if you do that, you'll learn from your errors and you will become more successful. And if you look at what's going on in school now, it's don't fail. We want to protect everybody from failing. We want safety.
What do you mean, like no more first, second, third? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, or, you know, when I was in school, if you failed, you repeated the year or you repeated the course. In dental school, you repeated the entire year for the loss of 1 course. The whole year. And if you did it again, then you were given an invitation to leave.
Yeah, you don't get a card that gets you into the club.
Yeah.
This is a club of people who take things very seriously. They spend the time. They're dedicated to the literature. They get it right.
Yeah. And I mean, and there were serious consequences. And now kids are sheltered from that. So how do you learn?
I have this theory. I'm sure that I heard it somewhere, and I'm just regurgitating it. I'm not saying I'm the origin of this theory, but I treat my kids like adults. because they're going to spend more time being an adult than a kid. They're on their way to being an adult. And the biggest thing about being an adult is taking a risk, falling flat on your face, figuring out what tripped you up, and remediating it. That's all we're doing here. That's it. That's the only thing we're doing. And so to that point, your scoutmaster, him tripping you up to see how you would deal with the adversity, that is our primary job as parents, I think, is to teach our children how to handle the adversity that comes with living on this rock.
Absolutely. And I might add, I still think we're kids. You and I are kids. And I think if you maintain that attitude, then you stay curious and you keep moving forward in the sense of continuing to take risks, continuing to fail, rising out of those. And risk-taking is just an absolute essential to moving forward. And
Risk-taking.
risk-taking.
We're going to pause on that while I just fill in a little blank, because the thing that I always like to do with situations is like switch one element out for the other. Okay, so let's switch the kid out for an adult, and let's switch the school out for a client. Let's say it's you and me, for instance. You engage me to, as we've done previously, design you a hydronic floor scenario that will heat your building. It's cladded, right? You and I, as we've done previously, we designed an entire interface. We have the subfloor made out of cross-laminated timber. We have an uncoupling membrane, which gives us the ability to move freely as mediums expand and contract. We have heating lines that are held in place with expanded polystyrene. We have another uncoupling membrane, and then we have the finished flooring on top of that. It's a very intricate assembly. It's a very expensive assembly that does a very crucial job, right? If any one of these things fails, the whole thing fails.
Yep.
Okay? Let's say, for instance, that this flooring assembly that I designed for you, that you accepted, failed. Whose fault is that? It's my fault, because I designed it for you. It's a piece of shit. It didn't work. And who has to remediate that? Me.
In our scenario.
Right? So now let's again swap the student back out for the adult, swap the school back out for the client. Okay? And we have a kid in school who put something together and it failed. Oh, it's not your fault. There's no such thing as a fail anymore. No, there is. There is.
Yeah. But the kid just lost the benefit of that experience.
That's right.
And they carry that forward. And
into their relationships with their potential employers, their potential clients, their spouses, their friends. They don't know how to fail forward.
there's no integrity. In the end, there's no integrity. Because without that responsibility and accepting the fact that you failed and then getting back on your feet or recovering from that error, then you can't have any integrity. So what you do is you blame somebody else.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. How could it have been my fault?
Well, and that was
I've never failed before.
that was one of the biggest lessons I had in dental school. Because to a certain extent, I'd already been taught how to blame other people, blame other things.
It was the client's mouth. It wasn't me. Is that what you're referring to?
This is in dental school, so now we're dealing with, learning various procedures and in the lab and that sort of thing. And the lead instructor for that part of our education, first year, I had done something and it didn't work, and I started to blame something else. And he brought me up short, and he goes, Harrington, he said, you have a habit of blaming other people. This guy named Bill Sanders. And he brought me up short. And I had the privilege and the honor a few years ago at a class reunion, and he showed up at that reunion. So we were, 40 years down the pike. And fortunately, he hadn't passed away, and I gave him a hug and thanked him for that so critical lesson. Because from that day forward, I realized that, as my dad had taught me, please don't give me excuses, please don't give me reasons, just get the fucking results. And Sanders brought me up short in real life, and he went, get the results and stop blaming other people and other things.
Just get me the fucking results.
Yeah. Okay, which
Yes.
is what you depended on when we met in the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Because from that angle, I had to get the result. And I can tell you, doing dentistry isn't as pretty as what you guys think it is. Okay, the whole thing is like being on an athletic field, and you are making constant adjustments all the way. You think that it's this little set procedure, and it's not. And it's a very delicate dance. Okay, the patient is oblivious, and when you have a really good team, what's going on is you have the operator, the dentist, and then in my case, I had a consummate certified dental assistant, and she was my teammate, and we would do this tango together, and we didn't have to talk about the procedure. The instruments would flow between us. We would see an error developing, and we would correct the error and keep going. And doing these projects is so much like a guided missile. People go, how do guided missiles get to the target? And they think it's one of these things. Bullshit. What happens is that missile's making errors all the way into the target and correcting.
That's right.
And that's what we used to do for you guys. There was, we'd get to the objective, but there would be these little errors and these little, it's art.
Very much so.
It's art.
The work that you've done for me in my mouth over the years that is the only way that I would be able to describe it accurately, is high art.
Yeah.
Oh, they're just beautiful components. You take a look at the teeth that you've rebuilt for me.
Wow.
You just look, you've showed me, look at what I'm gonna put in your mouth. That's this beautiful piece of gold. Perfectly sculpted to the inside of my mouth. It's a little sculpture.
Yep. It is. But it's an engineered living sculpture.
That's right.
And that's the thing. In dentistry, it's not straight art. It's the marriage between engineering and biology and art, sculpture.
But I'd take it even a step further and add to what you just said, that it is a piece of, guitars are pieces of art that make art, which is why I love guitars. Teeth, beautiful teeth that fit in your head and function properly, that you don't notice, that are foreign objects in your body that you weren't born with. Teeth, these two mortar and pestles in the back of my mouth that you rebuilt, that keeps me alive.
It does.
So here's a piece of art that enables somebody to be productive by staying alive. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And back when a dollar did something, I remember my father saying to me, every tooth in your head is worth at least $2,000 from a medical standpoint throughout your life. That's, again, when $2,000 actually did something, and
What is it
people
now,
actually
10?
did something for $2,000.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very interesting. Shit, we've covered a lot of stuff already that I want to jump around to.
Okay.
Mentorship.
Oh.
You mentioned 3, and I have this thing that I brought up previously about how when I was growing up in Summerland, I had the pleasure of so many beautiful mentors. And one of the things I remember hearing growing up was, it will be of the most importance to your adult life if you are able to isolate at least 5 people that you're not related to that you can call anytime, day or night, that will get you out of a jam or give you the advice you need to solve a problem. That will be of the utmost importance to your success as an adult if you have that. And I made an inventory one time of the I don't know what it was. I was just going through this inventory of gratitude and like the people that really made a difference in my life as a kid. And I think it was up until I think I did this when I was like 33 or something. So there's a lot of people on the list, right? A lot of people that you could call to get you out of a jam. Mentorship, I think, is and has been the most critical element in the success that I've been able to enjoy in my life. And it sounds like it's very similar in your life. I don't know if most people understand how important that is. I don't know if kids know how important that is.
It's not taught in school. It's not taught in school. It's going to be taught at the familial and tribal level. And it may be that you would get exposed to a single mentor who then brings that point back to you. Because as mentors, we can't be everything to the mentees. You bring something to the table, and then you teach them that that part is critical, but also there will be other things. And the bright people go and sort that out. Okay, as you have.
Yeah.
As I did. Okay, and 2 of my mentors now are gone, and the third is close to being done. I mean, in our age group, in fact, Larry's 12 years older than I am. Yoda.
Mm-hmm. He's still alive.
Yeah, Marceau passed away several years ago, and he was instrumental because he was just an iron rod of integrity, and that's as this conversation goes on, that may show up. Because, I think in our correspondence, you talked about, some of the things that helped me toward excellence. And one of those things was the mentorship.
It's critical, isn't it?
Okay, and then a foundation for that is establishing values.
Establishing values.
Values, okay.
What sort of values? And where do those values originate from? Where were they authored? Are those intrinsic values that you just naturally feel? Are those authored values that come from a school of thought?
When I was younger, I sensed them. I hadn't qualified them. And then several years ago, I had a life coach for a period. And one of the exercises he made me do was he said, write down your top 5 values. And I'd already sensed them, but I'd never written them down. And I'll share them with you because, well, they're my values. I mean, yours may be different, but for me, they were integrity and courage and freedom and passion and last but not least, fun. So
sounds like a Mel Gibson movie. Hey? Like Braveheart?
Yeah.
Those are like all of the attributes that you would hand a hero.
Well, I don't know about being a hero, but
you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Like those are heroic characteristics.
But those were things that were critical to me. Integrity stood at the top of the pyramid because without that, none of the others would work. But it takes courage to maintain your integrity because it's going to get attacked. Okay? And then you need to be free so that you can exercise those things. Okay? And I think that passion is critical. And the reason I like passion is because, and I'll just share, I had done something half-assed when I was 11 or 12, and my father looked at me and he said, that was pathetic. He said, if you're going to do something, and keep this in your quiver, do it like you mean it. That's what he said to me. Do it like you mean it. And years and years later, when he was almost done, like a couple of months before he passed, he said, I just don't get why he said, you're always so enthusiastic when you do things. I said, you old bastard. I said, the reason that happened is because you taught me that. And then the last thing is things should be fun. I mean, and I think that's what injects the joy into things, and that's also what helps you to do things like you mean it.
I think it also makes a difference in the final product. I think the final product, if constructed under the pretenses of everything that you just said, has fun attached to it as well. It will ultimately be an easier product to look at, an easier product to enjoy. Your life will be an easier product to enjoy if there's fun involved in it.
Yeah. And I think things show up in those products that wouldn't have shown up if there wasn't fun and passion involved.
That's right.
Okay, I look at that beautiful chessboard that you built for me. Okay, and I look at it and I just go, yeah. And you know, there are things in there that you'd never see in a commercially produced
ever
piece of gear. Okay.
There are things on that piece of furniture that I will never in my career ever again do. Just because I have kids now. I don't have the time to do anything that intricate.
Well,
but maybe I will when I'm a little older.
oh, you never know. I mean, and things will turn up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Mentorship, integrity, passion, fun,
courage.
All of those things lead to an excellent product, Roger.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to like commodify what we're talking about, but really at the end of the day, our life is accumulation of our values, and what our life looks like is a product that is consumed by people visually,
Functionally.
And functionally, when people walk up to your home, it is a representation of your judgment.
Yeah.
When they meet your wife, Roger,
Yeah.
Your wife is a representation of your good judgment.
42 years says either that or our ability to hang in there.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
The way you live, your clients, the people you work with, they're a representation of your judgment. And when you see a beautiful setting, it's not an accident.
No.
It's a result of a series of very intentional decisions made with people who take things deadly serious, like you and I do. You and I take things deadly serious. Whether we're sneaking up on a mule deer trying to kill him with an arrow, whether we're trying to fix my tooth, whether we're trying to build a piece of furniture, or a house together, or a business together. I know that when I'm talking to you, because of all of those things that you listed off, I have, first of all, your undivided attention. I know that if you and I were in a trench and we had machine guns, you and I wouldn't even have to say two words to each other.
We would have each other's backs.
Right? We would be talking with our eyes. We would know exactly, because we share these values. I think it is hypercritical that people understand what these values are and start employing them, these things that we discussed, so that we can look at more people in our community that way and have continuity of experience and continuity of values that you discuss. You know, when we're talking about, are these values innate? Are we just born with some of these values? Yeah, some of these values we're born with. Some of these values we're not born with. Some of these values, they are conditioned into us and through these mentors that you've described.
Yeah, they get trained, and we do it with our kids, you and I, and I think the tribe, and when I talk about the tribe, you know, I'm teaching these kids in archery, and the parents are part of the tribe that you and I are affiliated with.
Yes.
And these are people with backbone. Okay? These are not the airy-fairy people who are being raised through this government school system.
No.
I mean, they've turned away from it. And I mean, we're facing the potential of entering a modern day feudalism. And that is...
It feels like that, doesn't it, Roger? It sounds sensational, but it sure feels like what you just said is,
I think
very real.
We're perched on it, and we're going to try and figure out, we are actively trying to figure out how to sidestep this. And we may end up with a parallel society. We may end up with an outright World War III. Right now we're doing 5th generation warfare, which is more psychologic. This is the biggest attack I have ever witnessed in my 70 plus years. I had, 40, 50 years ago, I couldn't envision facing what we're facing right now and what our kids are facing, and they have no clue.
No, they have no clue.
Okay.
I mean, you take a look at our generation. We grew up without cell phones and the internet. I remember you used to have to buy another little keyboard to plug into your flip phone to. Somebody had one of those. That was fucking incredible.
Yeah.
You see that as like a teenager. You're like, what the hell is that? Is amazing.
Yeah.
Right. So we were still throwing. I was literally throwing sticks and rocks and hitting my best friends over the head with broomsticks when I was 16 years old. Just in the forest, just right down the street where I grew up from here. We would literally stand still like this, and the other person would throw a rock at the other person. That was what we did for fun.
Yeah.
We'd take our girlfriends up here on this hillside that I own now, and just use your imagination. We were out in the woods with our girlfriends. We weren't hiding out in a fucking basement somewhere, taking in whatever sort of information whoever thought we should have it was feeding us, which is what we have now. We have this web of hyper persuasive media that knows how to control our brain, actually. Mm-hmm. I'm not just saying that sensationally. They actually know how to control the human brain with images and light and frequency of images and light and messages and all. It sounds like completely sci-fi, and you know what? It is. It's completely fucking sci-fi. It's only for one reason. More control for them, and like you've described a feudal system.
Yeah.
More control for them, less control for us of our own brains.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. Do you disagree?
No, I totally agree. And Shoshana Zuboff,
Who's this?
The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, is the book she's written.
Okay.
I highly recommend it. I haven't even finished it. I'm about 2/3 the way through. I did it audio. It's a dense read, but it's worth it because that's exactly what is in that text. So if you have the time and inclination, either listen or read the book, but it describes in detail how that has developed and how it is currently being developed to control us.
Oh, it sounds crazy when we talk about it like this, eh? How could we have let this happen?
Well, I think to a certain extent, some of it was foretold in Brave New World, 1984.
Yes.
And I mean, we're in the thick of it now. And then, when you talk about the moral decay, help me out here, Atlas Shrugged.
Ayn Rand.
Yeah. So.
Moral and industrial decay.
Well, yeah, but they go hand in hand. Once the morals go, then the industrial tanks.
But people don't understand that, to go back to what we were talking about previously, the importance of having people like you, like me, who work with their hands and know how to keep not only the infrastructure of the human body running, but the infrastructure of our country running with their hands.
Yeah.
And not only that, but in Atlas Shrugged, they talk about that moral decay, which, yes, as you allude to, leads to industrial decay.
Yeah.
Slow erosion.
Well, you look at the goods and services, and most of it's flawed. Most of your goods are cheap plastic stuff out of China.
That's right.
And the one guarantee you have is that it will fail, and it will fail shortly, typically just after the warranty is expired. And so
That's right.
where does it end up? Up in the landfill.
We take raw material from our country, we ship it to China, they make fucking garbage out of it, these beautiful raw materials.
Mm-hmm.
They ship it back to us in the form of cheap plastic shit that lasts for, as you say, just long enough that you lost the receipt, you can't take it back for a refund, or you wouldn't be bothered to do it.
Yeah.
And then it fucking breaks. And it goes in the dump. And it goes in the dump.
Yeah.
That's what we've exchanged for having a high functioning industrial society based on manufacturing things locally. That's what we've what? We offshored all of our highest paid manufacturing jobs to China to enjoy that scenario that I just described?
Mm-hmm. We have. And not only that, a lot of that stuff is being produced either by slave labor or by kids. And then the effluent, the pollutants, they aren't managed the way we would be expected to manage those things inside this country. And so I think that's part of the reason that the stuff gets offloaded, so that we don't have to deal with it. And as you just pointed out, now we're dealing with using trash. And I think that's part of what's going to pose some of the environmental difficulties that everyone is screaming about. And, you know, the landfill is full of plastic and that sort of thing, and the stuff is non-recyclable. So, you know, to a large extent, your most valuable commodity gets wasted, and that is your time.
You said it was 60 years. I said it was 30 years. I was looking at it from the perspective also of this free trade agreement detail that came back in the 90s, when we started talking about free trade.
Mm-hmm.
And how we took a lot of our manufacturing plants and shipped them all over the world while telling people, oh, you don't want to do those jobs anyhow. Those aren't the jobs that we want to be training our kids to do, working in a factory. What is this, the Industrial Revolution? Working with your hands, you work with your mind now. You make your money with your mind, speculating on something, watching those little graphs in ticker tape going up and down. And you punch in here, you punch out there, you make a bunch of money, you work as little as possible, and you live on bread alone. Hey? And you just live on bread alone. That's what we've told people for the last 60 years, as you would argue. Mm-hmm. Just live on bread alone.
But it's a lie. That's the issue. And what you're seeing is in our society, have you read The Psychology of Totalitarianism? Desmat?
No.
Okay, but anyway, in there, one of the first things that struck me was 75% of the jobs in our society right now are parasitic, meaning, okay? So
Say that again?
They don't produce anything. A lot of those jobs are people overseeing what you and I do, making sure that we do it right, making sure that we don't do it wrong. The College of Dental Surgeons, our licensing body, okay? And if you get called up for an examination, an investigation before said licensing body, I can tell you unequivocally that the investigation is its own punishment. Even if you're exonerated,
right.
the stress is so huge going through one of these investigations, and on average, I endured one every 10 years.
Of your practice?
Yep. And I was exonerated on 3 out of 4, and the one that I got nailed on, I'm not even sure of really what I got nailed for. It was, in the end, they said, well, it's like getting a speeding ticket. It's nothing like getting a speeding ticket. A speeding ticket, you know, you pay a couple $100, you're done in a few minutes, and, you know, you move on. No, this was like a year and a half that they drag you over the coals. They make you wait. They tell you, well, you know, you could lose your license. Nothing serious. You know, you lose your license, right. You've lost your livelihood. And I mean, the last clinic that I tied up, I mean, there was, you know, way more than $1 million associated with assembling that structure. And in its initial phase, we'll come back to risk on that, but in order to assemble that, I had to bet the farm. I basically mortgaged all of my assets in order to assemble that structure so that I could keep working.
As you do. As we do. As people that work with our hands and are building workshops for ourselves to make money out of.
And then some little dingbat down in Vancouver literally could say, well, Raj, it's been nice knowing you, and you can no longer practice your trade. They call it a profession, but really it's a trade. And so that $1 million plus facility is stalled,
Yep.
and the bank payments go, and the next thing you know, you've lost that and you've lost your home. That's the risk.
Yes.
And when you and I put up something like this, you bet the farm.
You do. Well, it's what else are you going to do? Right?
Well, you and I,
What else are you going to do?
stones of steel.
Big rocks,
Okay.
Raj.
Yeah.
Big rocks.
Okay. But you have to have courage to do this. You have to be able to risk stuff. You might have to be, you suggested in the initial notes that maybe you need some luck. Let me tell you about luck. Here's a fun one. So here's a piece of luck that brought us together. This is over 78 years old.
Cool.
Just so you can see that.
Little compass.
Okay, so what is this? This is my father's lifeboat compass. So in the Second World War, his ship was torpedoed out for under him. And for 8 days, this instrument guided him and the guys he was with in his lifeboat to safety. Wow. And if they had failed, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation.
Beautiful. What a beautiful story.
So you talk about luck, something as insignificant as this little box, it's, the butterfly thing. And, a simple decision. And you and I make those simple decisions, and the consequences that fall out 78 years ago.
Wow.
So anyway,
That
I
is-
keep that by my
that's
desk,
amazing.
and I look at it. Why? Because the other thing is it reminds me of that, but it also points north. And having fixity of purpose is critical to achieving goals and excellence.
Critical.
So, something for you to consider.
It's a miracle that any of us are here at all, isn't it?
Yeah.
You hear a story like that, you're like, holy shit, well, that was... But shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and for me to even come out here from Vermont, where I grew up,
Yeah.
that was a frivolous decision. It was like, yeah, I want to go out to British Columbia and hunt and fish for a year, after getting out of dental school. And, that decision set into motion a train of events, again, subsequent to this,
Yes. Yes.
okay, that led ultimately to us meeting, ultimately to me meeting my beautiful wife, hatching the family that I have. And it's, the filament that connects all of us is so slender. And it's attached to luck and risk-taking. And I talk about risk with people and, making a decision to take a risk to build a dental clinic.
Let's talk about this, because when we were talking about the healthcare system not too long ago, you said something to me that really stood out. We are doctors that have been tasked by the government to build our own workshops in order to service patients versus
Real doctors.
real doctors that get to show up to work in a lot of instances. Granted, there are doctors that have their own practices. You see them and
They buy an examination table.
Right.
Okay? A dentist, Dentists are the industrialists of the medical community.
Explain that to people who are listening.
Okay, so we build a hospital. I have to have everything in my clinic that is in a hospital because people can decide at any time that they want to die in your chair.
X-ray machine, you've got all your sterilization stuff, you've got all your instruments, you've got examination tables.
Yep.
You've got all of that same equipment.
All of the surgical instruments, okay? I spend every day that I was in private practice, these hands did hard and soft tissue surgery from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. Okay, the business of being a dentist is you are really a professional athlete. And people don't understand the extraordinary physical demands that are placed on such an operator. And that patient's well-being is strictly dependent on that athlete's ability to perform time after time, hour after hour, day after day. And you have to be consistent and careful and predictable. And stuff goes wrong, and you have to be able to recover from that safely, all the while protecting that patient.
I had a realization one time after I got out of your chair, everything that you just said, you didn't, maybe you touched on the stress in that list, but I had this thought in my head of thinking to myself, like, no time in my career has a client ever been over my shoulder every second of a project that I've been working on for them. Mm-hmm. If I'm building them a dining room table or one of these chairs, it's not like they're sitting right there watching every single thing that I do.
Correct.
That is the stress that you have to endure, though. You are working on a living, breathing organism in a very delicate part of their body.
Yep.
Arguably, besides the genitals or the eyeballs,
as many nerves per square centimeter as the genitals.
And here you are with sharp fucking instruments.
Stuff that spins 400,000 RPM. Okay? Instruments that have no conscience. You make a mistake, a piece of structure vaporizes in a nanosecond. Now what? Oops. No, oops is a 4-letter word that's not allowed in a dental program. You don't say that, okay? And to a certain extent, oops can happen. Mm-hmm. And you remember we talked about fun. Okay, there is passion and fun, and if the team is assembled right and the discipline is there, then the projects go together really, really beautifully.
Yeah.
And many times patients are grateful. It's not why you do it because you need to achieve a really good result that is going to carry them for as long as possible. And the oral cavity is one of the most hostile environments that you can assemble anything in. I mean, there is the chemical and the physical aspect that is always trying to destroy what you've built.
And the age aspect. People's bone structure changes, their gum structure changes over time.
Yeah. And so, to a certain extent, the materials we use in the past were certainly self-adjusting. Some of the newer ceramics don't have that capacity. And so they need to be constantly adjusted. And so it's like having a really nice car. It has to go in for tune-ups and that sort of thing, which is why we try and get patients to come in for their recall visits. Right. Okay, and that's to maintain that piece of gear so that it lasts for as long as possible, and also to intercept other problems that may be showing up. Is it an income generating device? Yeah, it is. Let's call a spade a spade. Mm-hmm. But if, as in any other truly capitalistic transaction, there is value that accrues to both teams.
That's right.
Okay, and if there isn't a fair exchange of value, then you have large C capitalism or corporatism, and that's called rape. Mm. Okay, but in small c capitalism, as in this facility and what you do, you exchange valuable goods and services and funds with your clients, and both parties walk away enriched.
That's right. That's right.
So, and dentistry is similar. People go, it's a profession. No, it's a trade. We just get paid a really good hourly rate, which was part of what stimulated me to look at doing it. I wanted to have a good lifestyle. I made the decision at the age of 12. I looked across the street. My family physician lived across the way. His wife, his kids, nice house, the whole 9 yards. They had a lovely lifestyle. And John, who funded it, worked 64 hours a week in order to make that happen.
Yeah, he did.
Okay? And what was interesting was he was never around to share it with them. And when my father and I, at the age of 12, discussed what my future might hold, and I said, hey, I want to be an engineer like you, and my dad astutely went, well, don't be an engineer, because by the time you get to that age, there are going to be so many engineers, the pay is going to be really poor. He was prophetic. Okay? And then he said, well, what do you think of healthcare? And I pointed across the street and I went, he's never around. And the old man says to me, so what do you think of dentistry? And I went, dentists are kind of cool. They have the biggest houses, the prettiest wives, and the fastest cars. I want all three. I'm in. And that's how the decision got made at the tender age of 12. And then I ran into mentorship with Ed Marceau, and one thing led to another. And, you know, down the road, as luck would have it, here we are having a conversation.
Yeah.
And in the time that I was an active clinician, Marceau taught me the integrity of dealing with patients, getting the result, and helping patients achieve ultimately better lifestyles.
Yes.
And I got paid to do it. I got paid well.
We were in your driveway a couple of days ago. Your son's brand new $100,000 diesel truck had a panel that was swiped out.
Yeah.
And I said, what the hell is going on with this? He's like, I can't get it into an auto body shop.
Yep.
I said, what do you mean? He's like, well, there's all the auto body guys are retiring. There's nowhere to take this truck right now, and it needs to get fixed.
Yeah.
This isn't building a tooth. This is ordering a generic panel from a factory that produces nothing but these panels, unscrewing it, and putting the new one on. Let's just call it what it is.
Okay.
It's going to be very close to what I just described.
Perhaps. There's going to be some body fitting and that sort of thing. But yeah, basically.
Right.
It should be Tinker Toys. Screw that off, screw this
Lego
on.
for adults.
Cha-ching, we're done.
Lego for adults.
Yeah.
And you said something that was really interesting after I made a comment on that. I said, yeah, well, that's what we get. That's what we get for promoting IT and sciences to our kids for the last 30 years. That's what we get. We're not able to consume a basic service. I said, but you wait, the people that are in auto body, their wages are going way up.
Yep.
Way up. Look way up. And I'll call your auto body guy.
Yep.
Because those prices, I think you're talking about as a tradesman, as a technician as you were, you got paid well to be in a very sensitive situation like that in someone's mouth, as you should have. The trades are going to be the same way.
Yep. And so I think that's where we're going to ultimately steer our kids. The first thing is we're going to teach them how to think, not what to think. Okay. And that's
okay.
Because that's what's going on in the school system. And they are going to be the most dangerous human beings on the earth.
Yes.
And they ultimately, if we teach them right, they will be able to sidestep this impending feudalism. Because when the shit hits the fan and there's a dearth of skilled hands,
Yes.
then the elites will roll over because there won't be any stuff.
That's an Atlas Shrugged moment, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an Ayn Rand moment. That's an objectivist moment right there that you've just described.
Yeah.
Where when we finally extract all of the feelings out of the situation and all of the fluff and remove all of the speculators, What is it? What it is we're on a rock flying through space. And there are certain services that need to be supplied to its inhabitants in order for this experience to be fun. And if we don't have those services, it ain't no fun no more. It ain't.
No, it won't be. And we're seeing chronic illness creep in, and the health services there are promoting it. Now, I mean, there is a gang out there that you and I are aware of that they're busy trying to kill us. And
I'm trying to think of an organization that's not trying to kill or influence us to do what they want. I'm struggling with that. It seems like they're everywhere. They've infiltrated every aspect of our experience.
they have. And there's
Our diet, our media, our governments, both, all three levels of government, provincial, municipal, federal. It seems like nobody really wants us to be happy and healthy and productive, Roger.
only if we're enslaved. That's not happy.
It's not fun.
No. No. So I'm hearing estimates 10 to 15% of us who are on this other plane. And plane as in a line. And so, again, we're going to end up having to sidestep, and if we can maintain our health and stay away from the toxins that are being pervaded either nutritionally or through needles, then ultimately a lot of the people who have been lemmings and succumbed to this, they're going to be eliminated, and they will then not be able to vote, and they won't be able to reproduce. And I'm thinking numerically, that's going to be the way that we will prevail. And I can't see this being anything shorter than 10 to 20 years. So, given my lifespan, I probably won't see the emergence of what's going on. You'll be in your 60s as we emerge from this, if we're successful in emerging, and it's going to be my grandkids, your kids, that are going to be the people that fly this project out of the weeds.
I need to read you something. Can I read you this?
Sure.
This was sent to us by our outdoor school teacher. So we're doing what's called the forest school with Isla. And we started the day looking for thatching ants and trying them. They'd rip the heads off and eat the bodies. Most kids like the taste. We headed to our circle spot from last week for those who needed a bigger snack. And JD posed a question about some personal responsibilities we have. And some we feel we could work towards, some personal responsibilities. They're asking the kids, what could you do in your life to improve your life? And some of the answers were more time for schoolwork, going to bed on time, laundry, listening better, folding our own laundry, making our own lunch, cleaning up after myself, being able to remember stuff better. My daughter's answer: learning how to use guns and a bow and arrow safely. When I saw that come home,
Yeah.
I was so heartwarmed by that.
Yeah.
Learning how to use a gun and bow and arrow safely. Oh God, that was beautiful. Just like, she's just out in public. This is how she's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I want my children to be fucking assassins, Roger. I want them to be able to execute goals, animals, and whatever comes in their way. I want them to execute. And I think that the only way that we are able to train them in that capacity is to instill all of these values that you've pointed out. The courage, the passion, the fun, all of those things.
Yeah. And the skills, just doing the skills. I mean, as I said, we teach archery to that group of unschoolers.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this art. You and I have a fellowship that we've enjoyed most intimately that revolves around the design, production, and flight characteristics of highly tuned arrows. That has been a conversation that for the last, I would say, it's going on a decade now at least.
Yep.
That you and I have been vigorously testing our arrow making skills and arrow flight skills.
And the deliveries. With various misadventures with laminated materials.
Oh shit!
And I've experienced far more failures, I think, than you, almost at the cost of eyes. With bows that have blown up. But
you've been playing right on the cutting edge of archery equipment. And I would characterize you as somebody that has taken, I don't want to say undue risk, but you've taken risk in the equipment that you were willing to play with in order to see how close to perfection you could get with arrow flight.
Yeah.
Without sounding too dramatic. But when you get into it, when you get into shooting a traditional stick bow like you and I shoot, a stick with a string and another stick that's sharp. That's what it is. Let's just call it what it is.
Yep.
This is a very serious thing that's happening. It doesn't seem like it. It also doesn't seem like a meditative practice.
Which it is. It's one of the most centering things I do, and I do it almost daily. So, and that's what it does. I find that it does center, it calms me. I actually had an archery range in my dental clinic, and on occasion, well, not occasion, between patients, when I get a few minutes, I would go down and shoot, because I kid around, it would calm my shattered nerves after having to deal with Mrs. Huffnagel, who would, tried to die in the chair, or who would bleed, or just, lose her shit in the middle of a procedure. And I could go down and spend some time in the basement casting a few arrows, and it just totally centers you, because in order to drive an arrow to that point, you have to be totally focused. You can't be anywhere else except that arrow.
That's right.
So, and now I get to do it outdoors, and now that I'm retired, I shoot daily, even through the winter. And the materials, the physics, they're extraordinary. Teaching young kids is rewarding in the sense that they're learning about discipline, they're learning some basic geometry, they're learning about curved pathways, they're learning about the discipline, distance estimation. We teach them a little bit about trigonometry. And so this simple looking thing with all of its complex physics and dynamics becomes what I consider a very cool teaching tool. And it really has nothing to do with the bendy, sharp, and string that you just explained so well.
That's to say nothing of the beautiful life metaphor that archery offers, which is sometimes things are going to drop a little more than you think they're going to. Focus on your target, know your equipment, and practice.
And then there's the mastery of the mind. As you know, I battle target panic.
Yeah.
And so, and the kids are actually, some of them are starting to flinch. And so now we have to go through dealing with shot sequences. I mean, as beginners, they can fly arrows all over, and they do it beautifully. And then
When they're not thinking about it, they're really good about it.
yeah, and then they start getting good, and then their shooting falls apart, as you and I have both
Yes.
experienced. And you go through phases where
Oh, God.
you deal with it. And so, I mean, and that's the mental side that, you know, we're starting to deal with, and teaching these kids how to be tough mentally.
This is a very specialized form of thinking that you're describing.
Yeah.
This being in a closed loop. Being in that closed loop where you're not letting outside influences affect your decision to loose an arrow.
Yep.
You're just in this. And it can happen at any time when you're in the, and it's gone.
Going, what just happened? How'd that happen?
God, is that beautiful. It just flew like a dart.
Yeah, or sproing. What the fuck was that? I had one of those last night. I went, how did that happen?
Or
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, from our perspective, that's the thing that you continue to fight with. I kept going, I'm going to get to a point where this will just be automatic and natural. And as Joel Turner points out,
Yes.
Nope. You have to ride every single shot. Every one of them is a unique entity.
it's never normal.
No.
It's never normal. Joel Turner, by the way, Shot IQ, shout out to him.
Well done.
What an amazing product he's put together for people who take archery seriously. I know that he's been on Joe Rogan's podcast, but before that, I took his course
8-10 years ago. I remember you mentioned it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I handed off the literature to you, and you immediately subscribed to his method as well.
Yep.
Just amazing work that he's done in this ultra specialized modality. I don't know how, but it works. It works.
It
The
does.
method works. If you work the method will work.
Yep. Well, I've cured most of the issues, and every once in a while I get some stuff that haunts me, and I go back to his basics.
Yeah.
He's upgraded his course, by the way.
Yes.
And then, I mean, he surprised me because he dealt with target panic as an archer, and I didn't realize it when he talked to him with the Rogan interview. I don't know whether you heard that portion where he said he had target panic as a sniper.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God. And then he starts telling some of the stories.
Yeah.
And I found that a paradox, because if I shoot a weapon that is triggered, I'm the Iceman. But give me a stick bow and it will attack that target panic weakness that I have. But if I'm shooting a trigger, then, you know, it seems to be okay. I don't have it at this point.
Yeah.
So they're just two different entities. And I think it has to do with that message that you have to send in order to tell your fingers to release. And as soon as you know that that's going to happen, and all the ensuing shock, then the stuff that we're geared to avoid, then that's when I get nailed with the
Recoil bracing.
with it.
Yeah.
So,
Bracing for impact.
yep. So,
Again, the more archery I shoot, the more I do realize it is a metaphor for life.
yep.
The more, and you know, just aim properly. Like Jordan Peterson says, like just aim. Fucking aim at something. Something big, something beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And take it seriously, what you're doing.
All of it. But yeah, you talk about excellence, you talk about goal acquisition,
Yeah.
persistence, and all of those things are embodied in that sport and transferable. And I get reports back from the parents.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, the first thing is that the kids always have a good time. There's always laughter when we're out
Yes.
shooting. And I mean, initially it was fairly regimented because we had to just shoot the bales and, you know, get them into a routine where they can execute the protocols that you and I learned either through experimentation or, you know, from our various mentors, including Turner.
Yeah.
And so I'm passing those things on. They're learning those things. They're going home. Some of the kids now have started getting their own archery tackle.
Good.
So, and of course the parents are gratified because the kids have come home with a lot more than just poking the bales.
Yeah.
Way more. And so the metaphor is valid. And that discipline then transfers into their schoolwork or their unschool work.
It transfers. It can't help but seep into everything they do, I think. That's how important I think archery is. I think it is an absolute critical component of curriculum for people to learn. I think it's a critical discipline. I mean, again, like, it's so applicable
Yep.
to just survival.
Well, there is that.
Like, wouldn't you, if you had a choice to be proficient at archery, something that could potentially save your life from an intruder, let's just use that as an extreme example.
Yeah.
It could also put food on the table.
Yep.
It could also give you an outlet for meditative practice. It could also strengthen your upper body. It can also teach you about patience and dedication and all, just like, if you had a choice of learning a modality that taught you all of those things and gave you that competitive advantage that we talk about, that we want our kids to have, or not, come on. This is a prerequisite. I think archery is a prerequisite to a successful life. I would hate to sound so dramatic, at the risk of sounding dramatic.
It's certainly a really good modality to get there. It's one of the better ones. And I mean, when I first started teaching it, that was not what I was looking for. I just thought, well, we'll get some athleticism, we'll get the kids out. Interestingly enough, all of the kids are interested in hunting. They come from families that understand that as a way of subsistence. And so in our discussions, I've talked about how to execute a shot that's going to kill an animal. And the kids aren't squeamish at all. To them, it's just a clinical exercise.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of questioning and that sort of thing. And so they're learning a little bit about basic physiology. I tell them, if you're hunting and you're going to kill an animal with an arrow, basically you're doing surgery at a distance. First, they went,
right.
well, what do you mean you're doing surgery? And I said, you have 2 knives on a stick. And I said, you need to cut the maximum number of blood vessels in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah.
For 2 reasons. One, you want the animal to go down swiftly and mercifully. And the other thing is, you need a trail because they don't just roll over and die.
No,
They're going to leave.
sometimes they don't.
They are going to leave, and it would be nice to recover the animal. Nothing goes to waste in the forest if they get away unrecovered, but that's not your objective.
No.
And so...
Surgery from a distance.
Yeah.
The Roger Harrington archery experience. Surgery from a distance.
Telekinetic surgery.
Yeah, awesome.
So, and could we take a quick break here?
I can't wait to take a break and have a pee.
Okay.
And then we're going to get back to the money thing that you want to talk about.
Sure.
So when we are talking about adding value with one's hands to a situation, to a mouth, we're adding value with our hands to a mouth. We're adding value with our hands to a pile of wood. On the back end, and as a consequence of that value add, there is typically an understanding of exchange that happens. And for you and I, sometimes it was trading. We would trade stuff. Contra.
The purest dollar.
The purest, yeah. And you know, it's illegal or whatever we want to talk about, right? That's illegal. Okay, whatever.
but we're still going to do it.
Well, we're still, fuck you. We're still, right? So, you know, we'd trade a dining room table for a molar. Perfect. In instances where that is not something that's happening, which is the majority of business, we use credits, money. Something that they don't teach you a fucking thing about anywhere you go. You have to go to a specialized institution in order to learn about this medium of exchange. And even then, whatever they're going to teach you in a classical institution may or may not be correct about what money is. You have some insights into money that you want to share.
Sure. I mean, the first thing is that it doesn't have to happen in an institution. It can happen at a familial level. And my dad taught me those basics, as we talked about very early in the conversation, where I was paid in silver. And what happened was I got to touch real money. But Dad explained to me that over time, the paper money that was supposed to be attached to that was getting devalued. And that was a way that the government could steal from the people. And so I taught this to my kids. And you start out going, you have a certain pile of money that is backed by a certain amount of gold. And then the next thing that happens is the bankers go, well, we can churn out some more paper because no one's going to come and claim all their gold at the same time. And so long as they don't do that, then we can churn out some more paper. And what we've just done is, as a government or as a bank in the old days, the very old days, it was the bank, but now the governments do this same thing. They churn out a bunch of paper, they issue them as bonds, and what they can also do is take that same paper and give it away to the peasants in the form of, today, Serbs. So they're giving away what appears to be free money.
Which, if we take a closer look at it, was potentially a pilot project for the universal basic income that our socialist dictator asshole prime minister would love for this country to have.
Absolutely. And once people kowtow to that, then they'll be the feudal serfs.
This is the adult equivalent of no grades that we were discussing previously, right?
Okay.
The universal basic income.
Sure.
There's no first, second, or third anymore. This is the adult equivalent of that. Doesn't matter what decisions you made Friday night. If you got completely wasted drunk and you can't show up for work, it doesn't matter. You can still pay your bills. You don't have to take responsibility for your actions. You don't have to be productive. Here you go. Here's enough money for you to survive.
And if you're a bad boy, we'll make that money disappear.
Right.
We can turn it off, because that's what's looming on the future if we're dealing with a central bank digital currency, CDBC.
Sure.
Or is it CB? Anyway, that. And so then there'll be the ultimate control. But prior to the showing of that, that's the end of the currency cycle that we started in North America, like 100 years ago was really when, the currency and the gold were attached to one another. And they've gradually disengaged that mechanism so that the government ostensibly could do more and more, or less and less with more and more.
Right.
And using paper to facilitate these things, and also to create the illusion that we're wealthier than we are.
That's right. So it's not as if that gold has been uncoupled from paper, because we can still buy it.
So
it
far.
just means we need more paper to own it if we want it. The gold is still a commodity. And the argument has been for many years that instead of tying a precious metal to a currency, that there should be a basket of commodities that are tied to a dollar in order to have some stability in the currency. and expected price of the commodities as well.
But they end up shifting that around. And the beauty of gold or silver is that it always takes a certain amount of effort to get that stuff out of the ground.
Yeah.
And that becomes the measure, and you can't counterfeit it.
The value metric.
There you go.
How much value you have to add.
With your hands.
With your hands.
Here we go. There's a redundant theme here.
Yeah. How much value do you have to add to that pile of dirt in order to extract the very, very minuscule amount of gold per ton that is in it?
Yeah. And the gold does have some industrial application. You're wearing one of those industrial applications.
A couple of them. My daughter's asked to see my gold teeth when we're brushing our teeth at night. Dad, let me see your gold teeth.
And the gold tooth has a certain intrinsic value, but if we digress, there is a whole bunch of value added to that made it the monument that it is.
Yes.
In a sense, it is. It's a functional monument. The thing that we haven't touched on is the inexorable and inelastic thing called the law of supply and demand. And this is why the paper currency is behaving the way it is. So people complain about inflation, and when you have the law of supply and demand in place, if you have a piece of gold, there's only so much gold. Okay?
Of course.
And that supply is basically fixed. Yes, we're bringing more out of the ground, but as we do, we have to inflict a whole bunch of effort to make that happen.
Correct.
Okay, and so that remains relatively fixed. You've got the paper money supposedly attached to it, but what happens is this, the invisible hand that Adam Smith alluded to, when you crank out more paper, the market detects that change.
Responds.
And it goes, oh, there's a bigger supply of money out there, and there's still the same supply of gold. We want more paper to accommodate this fixed asset.
You see that in real estate.
Yeah. It happens
You see
in
it
everything.
in everything.
In everything.
In
And
tomatoes.
And that's because there's much, much more paper around, and so the paper loses its value. And people go, well, you know, there's inflation and prices are going up, and they don't understand the basics of the law of supply and demand. And there is a facade associated with this paper money. And so long as people believe in the paper, it's going to hold together. But one morning, just like Wile E. Coyote, Wiley runs off that cliff, and he's fine until he looks down, and then he's fucked. And that's what's going to happen with our paper currency, because it is literally at the end of its lifespan.
And when you take a look at the trajectory and lifespan of most paper currencies, it's 40 years. 40 years is a good run for a paper currency in its form.
I didn't know it was that short.
Well, and when you take a look at the history of the United States dollar and all of the changes that it has seen over the years, and it's pegged to gold, it's uncoupling from gold, it's this standard to that standard, to this amount of money that we printed, to the quantitative easing that we had to do after the 2008. You know, like, we're overdue. This is an aged currency.
Yep.
And so, you know, they're looking at, they know that the lifespan of a currency is X, typically, historically, metrically, and that's why they're trying to shift us over to this digital platform. And so, and part of that, from a democratic socialist perspective, which is the system that we enjoy in Canada, is I do believe they want us on a universal basic income, so that, as you say, from a social credit system like what they have in China, if things aren't going the way they should be going, they can just shut it off. They can shut off your monthly credit that you get,
Yep.
potentially. This sounds really fucked, right? Like when you're talking like this, but you're seeing it broadcast through these organizations. They're outright broadcasting their objectives. We're going to do this. Every country in the world is signed on for this. This is what's going to happen. Get ready for it. The Wile E. Coyote moment is happening. Am I wrong?
I think you're dead right. And then the issue will be, how do you escape it?
I don't know if you do.
Well, I think there will be some illicit barter and trade with metal, precious metals. I've told all of my close friends, put away some gold, put away some silver. The gold you do for your bigger transactions and maybe the preservation of your wealth way down the road. Maybe that's what gets passed on to our kids. But you have silver, and you can do smaller transaction. An ounce of silver is trading, what, about $40?
What's up?
Okay.
I wish I would have bought a lot of silver right around when I was buying property for the first time, because it was $15, $7 or something back in 2008.
Yeah, and I've speculated on it. I used to trade commodities, and that's the thing, that the price of anything is a reflection of what the market expects it to be, and most people don't understand that fundamental. Okay.
Lumber futures, pork belly futures,
Yeah.
soy futures.
Soy, pigs, whatever the commodity, coffee, the currencies, and I've speculated on almost all of those entities. As a joke, I hedged my dental practice buying and selling sugar futures.
Just for fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, and a sugar future, I think, is 100,000 pounds of sugar per contract. And I remember sugar was trading at 9 cents a pound then. But you can, with commodity trading, you can, of course, leverage the trading. And I don't know how far we should go with this, but the mechanics is that you put out a very small amount of money, and it's like a fishing rod. If you're on the right end of the fishing rod, it's really good. And if you're on the other end of the fishing rod, it's really bad. And so if the cost of the commodity goes against you, then your losses stack up very, very fast. Mm. And so I think a coffee future was like 38,000 pounds of coffee, and you'd only have to put up a few grand to control it. My favorite trade was when when Quebec was threatening. They had the referendum back in the 80s, and they were going to leave the country. And everyone got scared, and the Canadian dollar fell through the floor, and a Canadian dollar contract was $100,000 of Canadian money, and you could control that contract with $1,000.
It's a nice margin.
Pretty sweet.
The 1% margin?
1%. And a penny move, though, is $1,000 in or out of your jeans. And the Canadian dollar went through the floor, and I did a very sophisticated trade with an option, and the referendum failed by 1%.
Yeah, it did.
And the next morning, the Canadian dollar rocketed through the roof by a few pennies, and the put options that I had sold short expired worthless, which was very good. That's exactly what I wanted to happen, because I sold something I didn't have. Okay? And that is kind of incumbent on this whole thing that you were talking about, creating value with your hands. And what we did was a hocus pocus with stuff that I didn't even own. I sold something I didn't have, and then I was able to buy it back for 10 cents on the dollar in a matter of 3 days. So, I mean, there is another mechanism for perhaps creating wealth, but I will tell you that 85% of the commodity traders lose all their money and more, typically. It's a very dangerous game. It's a fun game because unlike going down to the casino, on the casino you're only allowed to stand on one side of the table.
Right.
But when you're in the commodities market, you can buy stuff or you can sell stuff, and you don't have to own it either way. And they're just paper contracts. They're not the real commodity. They're backed by the real commodity. And so as you come into delivery date of that future contract, things get very exciting because typically there's more paper than there is commodity.
Right.
And so the speculators can frequently get nailed in those markets. So you don't want to get into close to delivery. Otherwise, you're taking 40,000 pounds of live cattle.
Looking around for a storage facility.
Yeah, and the crazy trade that I did at one point, just for entertainment.
Yeah.
We were trading soybean oil and live cattle futures at the same time, and we were coming into delivery date, and my receptionist she says, "What happens if you have to take delivery?" I said, "We're going to have a hell of a fondue."
Shit. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
right on.
but that's, it's just another play on how money can work. But it's a very sophisticated synthetic game, and we're going to end up going back to the synthesis that's going on. This real life, being out in the woods, shooting stuff, killing stuff, making stuff, making body parts.
Yep.
Okay, versus playing on a keyboard with bits and bytes that really don't exist.
That's right.
And so this whole generation that is being raised on this through this synthetic school system, they will have no comprehension of what's going on.
They won't even know what they don't know.
Right.
They won't even know that it exists.
Well, because they'll be in virtual reality. And you're dealing with my grandson. He and I had a really wild discussion about artificial intelligence. The key word there being artificial. And he's thinking, well, AI is going to take over everything. I think AI is going to influence a lot of things, and in a fashion that is exaggerated. But in the grand scheme of things, when the smoke clears, human beings are still going to have to make stuff. He goes, well, the AI stuff, it'll make stuff. And I go, only stuff that can be done through repetitive action. Okay? But right. The true art...
Widgets. A widget factory. Right?
Yeah, okay, so that's the mass-produced stuff.
That's what you're referring to when you say
yeah.
only the highly repeatable,
yeah,
which we need a lot of in our culture.
Yeah.
We need a lot of shoelaces.
Yeah, and you made mention about mass production and that sort of thing, and for the widgets, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then for the individual problem solving, I can't see. There are robotic dentists. It's already been experimented on.
Yeah.
Okay, and to a certain extent, those procedures are repeatable. Okay, the crowns that we made that weren't gold are done with ceramic, and those are made by a robot.
That's just a 7-axis CNC
yep.
spindle that will come in, detail this piece of ceramic out to your specification.
Yeah, they're currently at 5 axes.
Okay.
Okay, and they're in-office ones that are 3 axes, and I can tell you they're shit. And
yeah, you want the extra movement. Because it's going to move this way on the table and this way potentially, and have a head that can do. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, but you can buy the machine for about $120 grand,
yeah.
And guys did it because they could sidestep the lab fees and own the lab fee. That's why they did it. But the degree of precision is horrible when you finally cement that crown. The edges where they finish, the margins, the finish lines are not contiguous with the tooth, and that means that there are microscopic openings, and then bacteria inhabit them and they go on to fail.
Now you're rotting the tooth next to it.
Yeah, or you rot the structure that it's sitting on, because now stuff can infiltrate at those, okay?
Yes.
And so that's a robotic technology, but we're up to 5 axes, and in the end, when it comes to the final finishing of that, a human being finishes it under a 40-power microscope.
Yep.
Okay, I cut the prep for that under a 10-power microscope, and that's not necessarily the absolute limit. There are guys that are cutting at 16 and 19x, but for practical purposes, intraorally, for doing that procedure, a 10-power microscope is unbelievably effective. When you and I did your crowns, I don't think I cut them under a microscope, did I? I might have been wearing the
Loops.
binocular loops.
Yeah, I think you were looped, Zeiced out, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so the Zeiss loops that I operated under were 3.5x, and the microscope was at 10. And the difference between those two is there was 100 times more visual information through the microscope than through the 3.5. And that was also a device that extended my career by another 10 years because it protected my spine and caused me...
Because you're upright. You're not hunched over somebody like this.
Yeah, twisted. It's not just hunched, it's that little twist
that
really fucks your spine.
Oh, in everything.
Okay, and that's what most dentists go through. And sadly, they haven't grasped what that does. And then, again, in my career, one of the things that we did is we linked up the microscope with a laser, and then we could do soft tissue surgery with the microscope and the laser. So we could do this beautiful soft tissue surgery, sculpting the tissue or removing tumors, and doing it accurately and effectively with a minimum loss of tissue.
So I guess one of the concerns that people have when we start talking about AI and robotics and all of those things is that they will, and maybe this was the concern that Logan had, your grandson, that all of a sudden there's no need for us anymore. Mm-hmm. The point that you're bringing up about this is that the robots are meant to augment the human process.
And they do, and they built the crown.
Yes.
But then it came out, and the laboratory technician finished it at 40x.
Yes.
And then I finished it again.
Exactly.
Because despite the fact that we took bulletproof records, there are still small discrepancies, and in the end, when your crown came in, be it gold or ceramic, I still had to touch that and make minor alterations in order to get it as good as it could be. And is it perfect? No.
But the argument is that no matter how good the technology in robotics becomes, I believe that there's always a this element before there is a this transaction happening.
Exactly.
There has to go through this quality control mechanism.
Exactly. And you can't get by that analog system. I don't think AI is going to do it.
No, well, it can't. It can't, Roger. It can't. This is too sensitive of a measurement tool. What we have here, it's too special
at this point. And that's what again, Logan is arguing, and I'm going, you're too young to appreciate.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
As much as we love you, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah.
And so, and that's going to be, it's going to be an interesting interface that we have to deal with these kids, and they are.
Thinking that they can farm out all of the laborious tasks to an AI mechanism, and then they can just be the predictors of their movement and the designers of product, I guess. Is that what the hope is that they can just be?
I think it's the expectation. I don't think it's hope. I think it's expectation, and that means that we're going to be doing nothing, and getting.
Well, we'll be eating grapes. We'll be eating peeled grapes. Is the expectation, right? This utopian where we're not laboring, we're not hunched over, we're never in an uncomfortable position. the only mechanism that we really need to use is our brain to program this robot, because that's all we've been taught to do anyhow.
No, that's all they have been.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You and I, being old school, we're gonna have that, and we understand the value of it. And with any luck, that archery class, I will pass on that to them and to my grandson once I can get by his initial belief that, you know, the AI system is going to rescue us. It's not.
No. No. It's not going to come find you in the forest. It's not going to pull you out of the ocean. Humans, unfortunately, still have to be a part of those intimate value-add situations.
Could be. Maybe a drone will.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one of my concerns, is that if we end up fleeing these idiots and you try and hide in the forest, there'll be drones flying through the forest. And right now, they're capable of doing that safely.
And that's why I guess we have auto-loading shotguns and buckshot. Roger, we've got a few minutes here left in our time together. Obviously, there's going to have to be more dialogue. I don't think we've even. I don't even think we're not even close.
No.
We're not even close to scratching the surface of the things that you and I need to talk about so that there's a public record of them.
Okay.
I feel as though that we've had so many productive conversations over the last 17 years that others would benefit from hearing. Others would benefit to know just that even if they were having similar conversations, there was somebody else out there that was also having that conversation.
Yeah.
Because that's, I think, the biggest thing. And Peterson touches on this. You know, all it takes is, you know, a couple of good people to say nothing. All it takes is just for everybody in a civilization and culture to lie a little bit every day. And then you have Stalin's socialism.
Yeah.
You have Stalin's communism.
Well, you and I can't lie. But we're just not wired for it. And I believe there are enough of us out there who have the integrity and continue to tell the truth and share that with one another and share it with the rest of the turkeys who may or may not wake up at some point. And Maureen just woke up another person the last little while. And that's going to be the thing that's going to help turn society back. If there are more of us than them, ultimately, even though I said it's 10 or 15%, there's at least 30% out there that understand what's going on,
right,
but are scared shitless to say anything.
That's right.
And
But what is that a symptom of? That is a symptom, I believe, of lack of leadership in the appropriate direction. And this brings up another question, which we don't have time to get into, but it's at what point do people who are already productively engaged in industry say, fuck this, this is heading in the wrong direction, we need to start running for office and do our civil duty to support our communities in a political way. You know, for you it wasn't that way. You were able to focus on your career, your entire career, and not have to worry about politics. But upon exiting, you find yourself with a balance of time, and you have now become a proponent and supporter of potential policy change in local, provincial, and federal politics.
I never thought I'd be a political activist. I thought that I'd just put my head down, make some money, make money over and above that magic pension, because the pension isn't going to cut it.
No.
And then, you know, hunt and fish and, you know, do the, do the traditional thing. I mean, I have to have a few quips about that, because years ago, I mean, the Indians had it figured out. I mean, they hunted and fished all day and got laid all night. And then the white guys showed up thinking they could improve that system.
Yeah, and we fucked it up. we should have assimilated. Instead, we thought they should have assimilated. No, we were dead wrong. What an embarrassment. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're going to have to pursue that, and I'd be excited to have another session with you.
Yeah.
If you so deem it.
Definitely. No, I think that there is a major conversation underlying all of the transactions that I do with my clients. It always comes up. It always comes up. It seems that I'm always attracting a certain type of client, like you, who has a successful business, understands the importance of bespoke material and goods, and has an awareness of their surroundings politically, commercially, and also usually very strong family detail in these clients that I interface with. We dropped off a table to a client out in Lake Country a couple weeks ago, and I brought my buddy Curtis with me, who to help me deliver a couple strong guys, bringing it in the house, and interfacing with these clients in a very limited capacity that he did, just helping me deliver the piece. He got in the truck afterwards and said, "Jeez, those are the type of people you want as in-laws. Could you imagine if your wife's parents were like that? You'd see how awake that guy was?"
Yeah.
It's amazing, right? So I think that like having a united platform for people who think the way you and I think locally, I think it's really important. Have a mechanism that we can talk to each other through, and yeah, I think that's really important.
It's absolutely essential, and and we're seeing it.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's going to be the thing that will sustain us through this bullshit. And if not, then we're going to get flushed down the toilet. And you mentioned something about what are the remnants of a civilization that's failed.
Yes.
And I think it'll be the creativity and then the culture. There will be the ruins of the physical stuff. If you had a major Holocaust, as in a nuclear Holocaust. But ultimately, it's going to be the culture and the brains that go on, and how that gets preserved. I mean, if it's going to get preserved on sticks,
right,
it might. But in the grand scheme of things, it will be in the brains of the survivors.
Brain to brain. So then it is of the utmost importance that we have the highest quality training and mentorship in place, and redefine our conception of education.
Without a doubt.
In order to preserve that fundamental human knowledge that we've discussed today.
Yeah, and some of us are doing that already.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. But again, 60 years of watching this thing devolve. 30 for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of the system is gone. I think that's a recurrent theme in this discussion. And so now we're looking at trying to pass on a different system of education and a culture. That's really what it is. It's the culture.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Okay. And we are what's the word? We're cultural mavericks. And that's where we are. We're outside the basic system. And then, having used the word maverick, you can't do it solo. Okay? Nothing great happens as a maverick, like as an individual maverick. Only, great things only happen with teamwork. And in the grand scheme of things, that's what we're called to do.
Yeah.
Is to build that team.
Take risk in group.
Yep. And that's what I did in my dental practice. And in my notes when I was preparing for this, and this will show up in another conversation, but one of the single biggest things that I was able to demonstrate was the leadership and the ability to build cohesive teams who had the same goal, and that goal was to serve the patient. And most dental practices now are business oriented, and they're designed to serve the operator. So my profession, most of the dentists I know are whores, and all of the doctors are whores. I can't say all, but the vast majority are whores. And the guys who aren't are guys like Charles Hoff and Malthouse and those guys who are standing up against this tyranny.
Yeah.
But they're heroes.
Yeah.
And in dentistry, there are only a few guys who've gone back to the basics. And that's where we are.
Roger, I appreciate your insight, your honesty, and your supportive nature throughout our discovery of our natural environment over the years. It's been a real pleasure. This is one of many conversations that I hope to catalog with you in the coming years as your insights grow, as my insights grow, as the situation that we're in economically and socially and culturally becomes more clear to us. We're able to speculate on it from different angles and see different things. I'm excited to get your input on it as we progress through our business and our life together. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks, man.
Thank you.